I can't remember what it's like to be in love. I know I was at one time. I know I have said the words. I just don't remember what the feeling was like. My boyfriend was my life. He was everything I had in the world. But it's hard to be in a relationship with three people, especially when one isn't even a person in the first place. Things have gotten so digital between him and me, to the point that even the normal words of I love you have been reduced to a simple heart emoji. Everything is about tech with him, and his obsession with it makes me question if he wouldn't replace me with a robot like in that old movie. He tells me that it's for relaxation, but I know the truth. So I set up a little trip to test my theory and see who will come out on top, tech or me. It took some prodding and some promises to get him into the car with no electronics for a whole weekend, but eventually we were on our way to the mountains. My family had a small cottage there where we could work on us with no interruptions thanks to limited cell service and electricity poles. It was just as I had remembered, and it was just what we needed. The first day was perfect. No issues, no distractions, just long walks, campfires, and a beautiful conversation by a small stream. It was idyllic, but sadly, it didn't stay that way. I woke up to find him on the edge. He looked different. He looked stressed and manic. When I asked what the matter was, he snapped at me violently. He ranted about never coming up here and about how he never wanted to do this in the first place and how he needed to get back home and how he couldn't find his car keys. I asked what was so important, and he said that he promised the guys a full day of Call of Duty followed by Monster Hunter World the next day. He was going to leave me, abandon me in the mountains if he had the keys just to keep some bromance gamer pack. I was beyond upset. I stormed off into the bedroom and slammed the door only to spot the keys hiding under the bed. That's when an idea struck me. Grabbing the keys, I went back out to him and gave him a choice. Me or them. Without a second thought, he snatched the keys out of my hand and headed for the car. I want to say I stood there and cried, shocked by the betrayal, but I can't. Something snapped inside me. I walked out of the cottage to see him about to get into the car, and that's when I saw this branch, this thick branch on the ground. It only took a second. Grabbing it, I ran up behind him and hit him in the back of the head. He fell against the car, turned towards me, only to get another smack in the mouth. I shouted at him, cussed him and his gamer ways to high hell before he looked up at me and said something. His lips were moving, but I heard nothing until I struck him one more time and he let out a hard grunt before his body hit the ground. I don't remember crying. I mean, I might have, but I don't remember doing that. I did stare at him. I don't know what I was expecting to happen. It started to get light out. I stared at him as the whole day passed away and he never moved once. I could have just left him there. He was going to do the same to me, but I didn't. It was a struggle, but I loaded him into the trunk and headed back home. It was an odd ride. I know it was the driving, but his body made so much noise back there. I eventually arrived to his apartment just before dawn and sat in the car wondering what really drove me to do this. And then it hit me. Technology. I got out, opened the trunk, got the keys from his pants pocket as I noticed the smell kicking in. I went in to find his PS4 in the living room and sat down on the sofa in front of it to find a controller. Once I had it in my hands, I had to know why he chose this over me. So I turned it on. I had no idea what I was doing. I eventually stumbled into a game and the screen lit up with life and actions of these soldiers that had such determination to achieve their goals. In that moment, I understood the obsession. In that moment, I wanted it for myself. But now what to do with the body that's lying in the trunk? Since everyone knows you can't game in prison. I lived in Portland all my life. I grew up hearing the stories. I went to the arcade, the only one in the city still around that was said to be where it was. I talked to people from that era that swore it was just an urban legend and those who claimed to have played it firsthand. The game that doesn't exist. True gamers know the story by heart. Back in 1981, a mysterious arcade game called Publius appeared, got people hooked, and had devastating results before it just disappeared after a month at this one arcade in the entire city. When I say hooked, I mean addicted to the point it became the worst drug to hit these streets ever. Players reported hallucinations, amnesia, and insomnia, while others were worse off than that, to the point of committing crimes or even one reported murder. It's believed that the government was behind it, since the day before it disappeared, some MIB showed up, collected data, and the machine never worked again. The next day, the arcade was broken into, and the only thing that was taken was that machine. That's what the legend states anyway. I didn't put much into the story, but as a gamer, I had to know more since the greatest game known to man disappeared in my own backyard. Unfortunately, sometimes some things are better left lost. It started as a message in my Instagram from an account made up totally of numbers with a link as the only content. Thinking it was spam, I deleted it, and then another IG made up of numbers sent me the same link again. I blocked it, and less than 10 seconds later, I had an email alert. It was an email from an address made up of numbers with the same link attached to it. I didn't know what to do, so I shut my phone down and tried to gather my thoughts. What was happening? Why was it happening? What did I do to get harassed? I took a breath. These sort of things happen all the time. Aggressive salesmen, or maybe it's one of those telemarketers, or it could be my friend screwing with me. But how could there be accounts or emails with only numbers in them, though? I knew it was impossible. After a few minutes of thinking, the paranoia sunk in, and I felt like everything was watching me. All number accounts and emails had to be government. It just had to be. So I turned my phone back on to a barrage of messages and emails from various numbered accounts filling up every inbox I had. I was in shock. Knowing this wouldn't stop, I opened an email and clicked the link to see an address, a street address, along with the day's date and the time, 9 p.m. It was around 5:30, so I knew if this wasn't a masterful prank, if I didn't show up, things could get worse. With time against me, I tried to look up the address, and of course, there's no such thing. How do I get somewhere that doesn't exist? I gave the street a search, and that's when the creep factor rose higher. In 1981, there was a street by the name they gave me, but it was renamed not long after the Polybius game vanished. Finally connecting the dots, I figured my research into the arcade game had obviously caught someone's attention, and with all the government conspiracy around it, I'm sure secrecy was key. With some more questioning of myself, I eventually decided to go see what this was all about. I mean, they had my information via social media, so the idea of ignoring this or running was just out. I headed over in my car to a street that didn't exist anymore to find a warehouse that took up the whole block. There were about 10 entrances that I could see, all with numbers above the doors. One door had the street numbers from the link on it, so I approached it for the door to open to a woman in a suit. She smiled weirdly at me, then thanked me for participating in the Polybius trials, and asked me to follow her. I hesitated, but then stepped inside. The door closed shut behind me, and the next thing I know, I was back home in bed. I don't know what happened. First thing I did was check my inboxes, only to find all the messages were gone, vanished without a trace. What are the Polybius trials? What data did they collect from me? Will they make me disappear too?